Yes, it just started.
All right. Ooh, that sounds silky smooth. Yeah. Uh-huh. It's your birthday. Come on. It's your birthday.
Oh, Lord. Yep, here we go. Cortana, quietly move your notification. Yeah.
Is it currently recording for us?
Yes, it is recording.
Hi, Patreon.
Hey, patrons. And actually, you should not hear motorboating anymore like you did on our first video.
Yes. Engineering was on and engineering solved it.
Well, I can't say I solved it because you're not hearing it through this. You're hearing it through that microphone.
Yes.
But yeah, it turns out that GoPros, particularly the earlier models like mine, have a little programming flaw between the, what was it, the Wi-Fi antenna and the microphone. And if your Wi-Fi is on, and I had the Wi-Fi on so I could use the remote, you'll hear the signals of pop, pop, pop. But you just turn the Wi-Fi off and it gets quiet.
Yes, it does.
So, hopefully you guys liked our first little video.
Yes.
I'm actually going to check the screen area here, make sure that it's...
What is it? That better?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm hoping so. Hopefully you can see something of me, but if not, that's fine. You can hear me, a voice off camera. Yeah, we just need to put a mirror back there so that I can see the images.
I think we can see you.
Yeah, I think so too. I think so. On to the file called podcast.
Hi, Gunner. Pleased to meet you. Not now. Hey,
Patreons, do you have the same thing with the new Microsoft?
Have you seen this? Hey,
you know,
have you seen this?
It's supposed to be the operating system on your computer, and it's doing what Scott's doing. Every time I'm, hey, do you want to buy it? That's like pop-ups on my computer, not online.
I know.
All right, what can I play with that's annoying for Scott?
Please send your suggestions to him.
We're going to start off with a little bit of, let me actually open
Says it me.
our Facebook, and I want to look at the stuff that we're getting from folks.
There's the melting thread.
Don't care about
Melting down. Moving on.
yeah, folks.
We'll get to that in a minute, guys.
Yeah. No, that's the wrong.
Yeah, wrong page.
All right, there we are. That's the one I want. Right there, right? No. What did I get? Oh, no,
That one right there.
it moved. Yes.
Up. That's group. Up one. Up. There you go.
We're just checking out your emails.
Yeah, pretty much.
And
No,
as you
we
can
don't.
see, I am somewhat... I'm okay with a computer, but sometimes I'm internet challenged.
No, we don't want a home loan. And,
Yeah, this is what I was looking for.
yep. Well, I do want to say thank you to that person, too.
Oh, yes. Yes. Driving the you-know-what.
Yes.
I love that. All right, so I've got that open and ready to rumble.
And Patreon, you'll see this before the rest of us, is we're trying to get a head start on some of these shows, so these are always the fun ones, aren't they, Kevin?
What, the ones we have no idea what we're going to talk about?
Shh, no, we absolutely know what we're going to talk about every show, every time, right, Kevin?
Yeah, sure, go ahead. These are our Patreons. We're supposed to be honest with them, Scott.
Yes, so we're peeling back the curtain. Hold on. Let's spin the wheel of show topic.
Oh, let's see here. No, I expect we're going to discuss the bump stop issue for the technical segment. You got your little thing, your little diatribe on the local flame wars on the interwebs.
But we can start off about what we just did to my Jeep.
That's probably good since we literally, folks, and we're being serious here, literally today before we did this show.
Dodging lightning,
crawling around on the driveway.
I still had dirt under my fingernails. Parts guy got dirty.
How did you do that? I was the one laying on the ground, not you.
Parts guy got dirty.
All right, well, I think we just roll with it and see where it goes.
Sounds like a plan. I'm gonna hit record now. Boop. Hi, Jeepers. Wait for what? Oh, no, forget. Take 2. Hi, Jeeples. Welcome to another episode of On the Trail with Kevin and Scott. I'm Scott, the parts guy who has, the slapstick parts guy that pretty much just talks about parts and how better ways for you to get them. Speak good microphone, do I? I went full Yoda.
He's getting me off right now in the beginning here. And I'm Kevin. If you haven't figured that out, I'm the engineer. And yes, I am an engineer. And basically went to college to learn how to read directions. And I actually do follow them.
And I went to college to learn to speak on a microphone.
And you actually do that better than I do.
Pay the teacher off on that day. Moving on. And remember, while we will share what worked for us, and as well didn't, see show number 72.
Yes. Whoopsie.
It's really up to you to get what you want for your Jeep. So do your research, read the instructions.
And please follow them. That's what they print them for.
Exactly. And hopefully I got this right. So welcome to show number 73.
You can add. I'm impressed.
I know.
You can add 1 to any number, can't you?
Almost.
Almost.
Yes. So that would be, the next show would be 73-1.
Okay. So,
as we're trying this for the second show in a row, our patrons, we had that blinking red light to my right and to Kevin's left.
Mm-hmm.
So again, check it out.
Maybe we'll move the camera around to the other wall. It's one of these times so you guys can see the other wall in the studio on this side of Florida.
Yes, sounds like a plan. So as far as this goes on, we kind of have a little bit of fun. For those of you who haven't heard yet, by the way, I hope we had a happy and safe 4th of July. I hope everyone started the holiday and ended the holiday with the same amount of digits and eyeballs.
Yeah, and without any extra scorch marks on their body.
Exactly.
Or their houses, or their Jeeps.
Yes, please be careful.
Yeah.
I guess it's past tense. But anyways,
yeah.
So speaking of things that went awry, not really awry, but I want to say thank you, Kevin, because before we started recording, we actually finally, for the most part, I think I've nailed this down. Hopefully it's not a step issue like that you had, but I've had a wandering issue with the JK, and of course we've had other shows where we talked about we replaced the steering box, we fixed the wabajad out hole with the track bar.
And we just had that discussion over, what was the phrase you used, the raising the bar every time, you know. And you've been kind of doing that. Yours is one of the JKs with the Dana 30 front axle.
No, Dana 44.
Oh no, you had that's right. Yours is a Ruby, so you have the 44. But you've already trashed the steering box, and you've trashed steering linkage, and blown out a couple of U-joints. Busted up a brake caliper and a wheel bearing.
I've done a lot.
Well, and you know what? You can't take all the credit, because I do know your wife has done a few of those.
Yes, she has 2 speeds, yeehaw and stop.
She has stop? I've not seen that. I've kind of seen the yeehaw, and I've seen the hold this, watch me.
Yeah, hold the camera, take a picture while I do this.
Well, I always found it interesting was we would, folks, we would wheel up in Georgia, and we hope to get back up into North Georgia again. Yeah. And there were a couple of really wild obstacles, because, you know, the nice rocky mountains of Georgia, readily lubricated with red clay, greasy all over the place. And a couple of the hill climbs were probably 600-700 foot verticals, you know, in the V cracks. And I go up it in slightly altered, which is a TJ. And quantum entanglement. No, what? I'm sorry, Nightcrawler.
At the time it was Rockcrawler. Right now it's going to have a name change. But
okay.
We.
Is that bad luck, like renaming a ship?
We're going to find out.
But, you know, Dory would be looking over Scott going, I can do that, in a JKU Rubicon.
And she did. Four low and gave it a deck.
But I do remember shouting, fold in your mirror. What? Fold in your mirror. Okay, why?
Never mind.
Never mind. She did not admit it. She did get it in before she slid down into the hill. And then she got it out. And then I love that one. It was like, she says, well, what do I do? I said, turn left. But that's the hill. Turn left into the hill. But it's a turn left. And she would go, a little bit of a turn. No. Turn into the hill like you want to run over something.
Oh, like Scott's foot?
Exactly. And hold it. She says, it won't turn. I said, just hold it. Maybe we figured out how you broke the steering box. No.
But I'm sure we took a little bit of life off of it.
It definitely, it it dug into the hill, and sure enough, those side biters on those tires pulled it right up and got her back on a level keel.
Yep.
Folks, this is one of those arts that I can't really explain with words. You have to see crawling up a V-crack, where the bottoms of your tires aren't really running on anything. You're running just on the sidewalls.
Yeah, using side biters.
And she took it on up. She got it all the way up. And by the time she got out, and I says, well, now here's your payback. You have to clean the mud out of your rims so that you can actually find your valve stems.
Well, it's kind of like when you cook dinner, you know, like whoever makes the dinner gets to sit down while the other one
Cleans up after.
So yeah, I got the head of the brush. There you go. Yes, dear. But
so anyway,
we've been chasing some steering issues.
Yeah, you have had a little bit of the weeble. It didn't fall down, but it wobbles.
Well, it wasn't really death wobble. It was hold the steering wheel straight as the Jeep wanders between lane and lane. You know, the old joke, you know, sir, have you been drinking? No, it's the wind. No, actually, this time it's something more than the steering, dude.
Yep. Yeah.
We replaced ball joints. We did all kinds of stuff.
And then you were telling me that when you would turn the wheel, I actually heard it right before we started surgery, was that
Bushing.
yeah, that kind of grinding, crunching noise of steel on steel that's not happy.
Yeah, the Heim joint went bye-bye.
Yeah, so his upper Heim joint decided to check out, and rather than just order a replacement Heim joint, because it was an inexpensive used kit that you put in.
Yeah.
So you got a brand new.
No, it was a new track bar when I put it in 70,000 miles ago.
My error. I'm sorry. So anyway, Scott attempted to change it himself.
Yeah, and unfortunately, you know, I can actually kind of talk about it now a little bit now that everything's done.
Now you're cooled down.
Now that I've cooled down. But no, unfortunately, around November last year, I sustained a lot of injuries. 3 herniated discs and 4 bulging discs and a torn rotator cuff thanks to a rear end collision for the drunk driver. But I could not. I didn't have the strength.
Yeah.
And you know, Kevin's air gun is set on fuse a planet. So unfortunately,
it's a track bar.
I know.
The factory specs are 250 foot-pounds.
Yeah, you got it there. So I am literally.
And did it ever come loose?
No, literally. I broke my breaker bar trying to get it off, and I'm just over there.
It's called a breaker bar for a reason.
No, you know, I read the instructions, but I'm underneath there just grunting and giving it all I can, but I just don't have the arm strength anymore. I'm like, all right, Uncle, and you know, again. We always make a joke about how, you know, I'm cheap, you know, well, because I'm going to do the new lift eventually, hopefully. I bought the roughest of the rough country track bar.
It's not a bad. It's
no, it's
actually
not
a very good track bar.
Pretty stout.
It's very stout. It has the curve bend in it. That's the only thing about them when they have that curve bend. I understand that's needed to clear the diff.
Right.
See the last show. It's just a built-in weak spot. Yeah. However, I know the way you guys wheel, and I don't really think it's going to be a big problem.
No.
But it's actually quite a bit stouter than the one you took out.
Oh yeah. So we took off the old track bar and a biopsy, and of course not only was the Heim joint dead, we also found a really nice split in the other side.
Yeah, the bushing, the Cleveite bushing that whatever, I don't even know what brand it was. It was just kind of a generic track bar.
Yeah.
And the Cleveite bushing at one end and a Heim joint at the upper end at the frame end. Because you know the JKs use 2 horizontal bolts, whereas a TJ uses a vertical in the frame and a horizontal at the axle.
Right.
And but the Cleveite style, it wasn't rubber; it was actually polyurethane.
Yeah.
It had basically said, "I'm being stressed," and had a split personality.
Well, it was a rock crawler.
Okay.
Track bar, and let's be honest, 70,000 miles of not being babied with a 6,000 pound Jeep. I got my life out of it.
You did, and in all honesty, you could have gotten a new Heim joint end and a new polyurethane insert and put it back in service. But for what you were able to purchase the new bar complete, why not?
Why not? Yeah. So we took it for a test drive, and so far, I think for the most part, you know, I got a 50-mile drive home.
Yeah.
But for the most part, it seems a lot more firmly planted on the ground, and now that I've also balanced the tires, it's a little less going down the road going.
Yeah. So that was just one of those little quick swing it up in the garage. Didn't even have to jack the Jeep up. I just slid under it with the air gun and hammered it off.
Yeah, pretty much.
Then clean the rust off the bolts and
just hammer
them back on again.
We went to town. Speaking of which, I do want to thank Dennis. He is our resident brown brown truck driver. He uses a T word and
the 4-letter
followed by
T.
U and an R and a D. And Dennis, thank you for delivering that bar to Ron of Red Scorpions. We appreciate that. But we wanted to make sure we said hi because he said, hey, have a great weekend. Awesome show, guys. That last show was amazing, and we appreciate
that.
Thank you, Dennis.
And it's kind of humorous, guys. So, if you're in the Tampa region and you're having parts delivered from any one of the suppliers that send stuff, and they're coming in Big Brown, the driver, we know at least 2 drivers for Big Brown that listen to the podcast and drive Jeeps. So you could be getting Jeep parts in a truck being listened to by somebody on the Jeep show who drives his own Jeep.
So we all make jokes about Jeep waving to the UPS driver, Dennis and the other guy may wave back.
They can, and I may start driving to UPS trucks. So no, hats off to them and hats off to UPS if you're willing to haul those steel parts. I do know that my UPS driver unfortunately was out on leave. He swears it wasn't for any of my parts, but he managed to throw his back out moving boxes. And I'm feeling very guilty because, they did deliver the head for slightly altered on the engine.
Oh, yeah, I remember this.
The front axle. Oh, boy.
Yeah, that's like when you get your lift, your wheels, your tires, and the winch, and you get the note, the love note going, not funny.
Hey, my wife, she orders water from a company. And they deliver boxes of water. I feel for that poor lady. She's with the other delivery company, and she knows who we are. And she knows.
Yeah. Who's the crazy person ordering water?
Yeah,
hey, it's a good water.
It is. Oh, it's wonderful stuff. But
yeah.
Anywho.
Well, speaking of getting stuff delivered, I want to take a few minutes out to give a huge thank you and shout out to Tom and Dan at the A Mediocre Time with Tom and Dan podcast. They sent us a little care package of stickers, so that's kind of cool. I have to give them a shout out for that. They even marked. It's our first official mail that said OTT podcast, Ben Axel Media. And I'm like, hey, this is cool. We're official now. So I just want to say a big thank you to those guys. If you do check them out, just remember they are not safe for little ears.
No, they're not. They're an adult entertainment group.
Yeah, not adult like X-rated, but naughty words.
Yeah, like George Carlin's 7 words you can't say on TV.
They say all 8. So,
make up a few of their own, don't they?
They even pantomime ones you can't say. But again, thank you guys. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, we do. You're talking about little teasers. Just I'm gonna throw a teaser out, even though it's technically the middle of July. It's still several months off.
I think we can safely tease this a little bit.
We can tease it a little bit, folks. Is that towards the end of this year, there'll be a new announcement coming out from the podcast. No, we're not going away. No, we're not changing format.
No, we haven't been bought out by a huge multi-billion-dollar conglomerate, but we're not open to it, or we're not unopen to it.
But yeah, we've had some great news for later this year that we think will be great news for you guys and girls and anybody in the general vicinity.
Anybody in the aftermarket society.
Why don't you just give it away?
No, we got a little bit now.
So anyhow, we will let that go for the moment, but I think you'll enjoy the results of this. We're excited. I will tell you that's gonna take a chunk out of the budget, but hey, that's okay.
That's what it's there for,
That's okay.
It's only Jeep parts I would be buying. But
That's true.
I'll keep buying the cheap ones. It's okay. And also, too, another heads up, Chrissy Johnson did finalize the Crawl for the Fallen, if you haven't seen.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, they did secure the property, so I think July 16th opens the registration. We'll share the links with our social media so you can check it out. But if you want to check it out, it's offroadunited.com or Crawl for the Fallen. If you Google either one of those, it'll come up.
Or Facebook it.
Facebook.
And Chrissy puts on a fantastic ride and show every single year. And of course, it goes to support the families of fallen first responders. Awesome charity, great event run by a great person. So, if you're anywhere in the Central Florida region, anytime, when does it actually?
The same weekend we just teased.
Okay, so it's in November.
Yeah, November 8th.
So that's fine. You may want to come on down and set up and get your entrance fee and come down and play in the sand of Florida. And particularly if you're a little further away and can make the trip, you can get down into the warmth and of Florida, because it'll just be starting to get pretty cold and snowy up in the north.
Well, and that's in November time, so we're done with the face melting hot, and then it's just hot.
We hope.
But and also too, good news also, Buddy and the folks over at TJR checked out some prospective properties.
Mm.
So, in case everybody wants to know, basically this is just a heads up. Like last time, it was kind of doom and gloom for both things.
Yeah.
Now there's some hope.
There's some hope
Especially
that
for Buddy.
we could see it coming back.
Yeah,
The Jeep Ranch.
Absolutely, which will be really, really super, super cool. But anything in your neck of the woods that's happened with you, Kevin, recently, or?
Well, I was gonna give a shout out back to Patrick.
Okay.
He's up in the Northeast, and we talked quite a bit about a subject with Patrick for Patrick last show when we were talking about track bars.
Alrighty.
He listened to the show, and he went out and he kind of came in and in true OTT fashion, I've got to give the guy credit. He kind of was, yeah, I guess I did bend it. What he ended up doing, he said, was he didn't catch the fact that he was having trouble on his up travel of his suspension, and the suspension was going up far enough that without being stopped by a bump stop that what did he say here?
I guess that he didn't have him properly dialed in.
Yeah, and his track bar. Let me see if I can find it here real quick. But anyway, it was contacting part of his frame and bending his bar from overhead rather than down below. And as soon as he looked at it, he found the witness marks. So, Patrick, I'm glad you found it. That's kind of the challenge. And he realized that his bump stops weren't set correctly. And so I think when we get to the garage segment, we'll probably take a few minutes and talk about different ways to set your bump stops up correctly.
Yeah.
So, because that's one of those things that, I'll be honest, Scott, I didn't find any references on that when I was new to Jeeping.
Right.
And other than what the manufacturer's instructions said, which were all, here, we give you these, put them here, and if you need to adjust them, either add or subtract.
Well,
so how do you figure out how to adjust them?
Well, and that's what we covered. We covered a couple of shows about bump stops, but I don't think we really dove too much into that.
No, and we're going to go a little deeper into ways you can check your bump stops safely and figure out what you need to do to make it work.
Yeah, well, that's coming up in the garage. But William Perry, I want to take
okay.
Oh, hold on. Yeah, I want to take a few minutes out. So that's going to be coming up on a new episode. Hold on, damn it. That's coming up on the garage segment, which again will be really cool, and I can't wait to do that because I'm sure Patrick would just love to hear some of that. But I want to take a couple minutes out to talk about William. He sent us an email basically saying that, he wanted to say thank you. We've actually inspired him to, basically, because again, he likes my comments about how social media is full of snark and anger. So he took the time to do something positive and come up with a Jeep Tech talk tips and groups and stuff like that. The actual page is Jeep Tech Tips and Tricks.
Okay.
And, to do positivity and stuff like that, which leads me into a quick little subject.
Uh-oh. Is this an off the trail with Scott?
This is going to be a stop it.
Oh.
Stop it. Tales from the parts counter.
Okay.
Okay, another one. Again, the internet can be full of snark, and sometimes we all we feel wrong, slighted. Just pick a subject. We all feel upset. Butthurt. That's a great way to do it. Moving on from that subject, But my butthurt is fired or powered by the burning of unicorns and whatever. I don't know. But anyways, it's green. But no, again, if you have a gripe with a company, the internet can be a valuable tool to vent your frustrations about that company. And I'm not going to sit there and get into the ins and outs of why you should and shouldn't. That's not my place. But if you really feel that strongly and you have an issue with somebody, especially if it's not the owner of the company, take 5, send that person an email, find out how to contact them and say, hey, look, this is what happened, and reach out to them directly. You know what I mean? Because again, the age-old subject of you never look good talking bad about somebody else.
That's true.
Again, it's tough.
And I'll be honest, as many of the different vendors we've talked to, including the company owners, most of them are welcoming reasonable and rational people to contact them with problems.
Right.
That's how they improve. And it doesn't. You don't have to go back too many shows to hear me preach over and over and over again that well, rational behavior. I won't go into depth on it too deep, but it's how you judge a company is not just on their product. Every company strives to make their products perfect, but what makes a great company is how they handle it when things go wrong. All right. And that is the determining factor. But if you just automatically jump on the interwebs and start flaming, you haven't even given them an opportunity to show you if they're a good company or not.
Yeah.
And I've had plenty of questionable products come in and questions and issues to deal with. And for the most part, when I'm dealing with Jeep parts, every manufacturer has been fantastic. And no, I don't tell them I run a podcast when I order or
No.
have problems.
And that's the thing we don't do. We don't sit there and throw our weight around, you know, because
We
again,
have weight.
well, we actually do carry quite a bit of weight. And thank you to all of our listeners, but
No, they carry the weight with their pocketbooks.
and that's why we always say it's your podcast.
Yeah.
The last thing I want is to speak ill of something when you guys might like the product. Moving on.
Yeah.
But again, like Kevin said, if you have an issue, talk to them. you
Now,
know.
if they truly do blow you off, then social media is a great way to get their attention that you're serious.
Yeah.
But there's no need to go into a flame war 90% of the time. I guess, at least speaking from my experience, you know, I've had products that have had defects in them and they've been fixed.
Yeah.
They've been replaced. They've taken care of me. And I really have nothing bad to say. I've never had or felt the need, is the way to put it, to go on a flame war because I got a product that was defective or broken. I just pick up the phone or the help email and say, hey guys, I received this and it's busted.
Yeah, and again, you catch more flies with honey than you do vinegar.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and many times Kevin and I have been, just today where I work, I had a guest come in that, you know, had some problems with the battery in the remote. And, you know, between me and you, the punch bowl, those batteries cost me 0.5 cents.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? It literally cost me nothing for a key fob battery. They said, look, I tried to do this, just wasn't sure. Can you help me out? Approached me very calmly, very cool, and I had a couple minutes to share, and I said, okay, well, here's how you do it. And I showed them how to take it apart. I went ahead and put the battery in and then showed them, and they were appreciative. They said, thank you very much, I'm just having a bad day. And they apologized and said, here you go, here's your key. And they go, well, how much show you? I said, have a nice day. This one's on me.
Yeah.
You know, because again, they were having a bad day, and as I left, I said, hey, just make sure you give us a good Google review. You know, it was a self-serving act, but the idea is that even though they were having a bad day, they came across as, look, you know, it's not your fault, but how can I fix this?
Yeah, well, and I'll share. Earlier this month, I was flying up to visit with a company up in Wisconsin, and that particular day that I flew, the weather was absolutely abysmal. There was heavy storms down here. There was heavy storms up there, and I'll be honest, what should have been about 4 to 5 hours of travel ended up being 9 to 10, and I really shouldn't have made it at all. I did not fly on any aircraft that I was scheduled to fly on. I did not take any shuttle buses I was scheduled to take a shuttle bus on, but I still made it to the location. Now granted, I didn't make it till midnight, but it was it wasn't the bus driver's fault. It wasn't the person at the airline counter's fault. They don't schedule the airplanes. They don't call down the weather, you know.
Right.
And by being nice to them and, you know, being polite, but explaining that I was in need to get somewhere and that if I didn't make the flight, it wasn't worth me going and that I would have to turn around and just go hunt a flight home.
Right.
They helped me and I got there. I actually got put on standby, made every connection that I needed to make. Like I said, not any of the flights I'd actually were on my tickets.
Right.
But I made it there and I made it by midnight and was able to get up the next morning and do the visit that I needed to do and come home. And had I gone up there abusive, like some of the frustrated passengers in front of me who didn't make the said same flight.
Yeah.
So just remember that your attitude can be contagious,
Yeah.
good or bad.
And many times, again, you put yourself in their shoes, you know, depending on what you do. And also, too, real quickly, though, because I'm terrible at stuff. Sean asked about purchasing a Sahara, buying his first Jeep.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I'm close to buying my first Jeep. I'm very new to Jeeps and the mechanical side of vehicles. I'm looking to buy a 98 TJ Sport. I'm not sure exactly what to look for when buying when it comes to possible issues and things to look for and what might need to be replaced. So here's a link to the exact one I'm looking at. Let me know and it'd be greatly appreciated. Well, pretty much we already covered it on another show, but basically what to look for frame rot, check the compression in the cylinders, and make sure the Jeep looks in all around good condition. If you join a local Jeep group, post up there, hey, I want to look at this Jeep. If you want to come look at me with it,
Yeah.
or come with
Yeah,
me.
no, you
with
said it correctly.
Okay.
Look at it with me, it's fine.
Thank you.
And Sean, again, we did a pretty in-depth show, and if you go back to our website, you can go to the podcast list and scroll
It's
down
one of
and
the
find
first
it. It's
ones.
one of the earlier ones.
So you want to buy a Jeep? I think that's like show 8 or 9.
I think it's something like that. So you want to buy a Jeep, and we go into great detail there, and I don't want to repeat myself all the way, but Scott's right. Probably the biggest thing in the TJ model is check for frame rust, and that just simply means, bring yourself a piece of cardboard or a mat or a drop cloth or something if you don't, or just wear old clothes.
Right.
Stick your head, you get underneath it, look around, take your finger, poke the bottom of the frames, particularly where they curve up from the center section, kind of in the middle. And if they're solid, you're probably okay. But that's where mud and dust and dirt collect, and that's where the rust collects. And we talked about the show the other time about the cleaning it out and the little plugs. Some other things to take a look at. There can be body rot on TJs in a few places, but that's not always a reason to not buy. If you're handy with body work or willing to pay someone to do, they're flat panels, so they're relatively easy to fix. Just ask Scott, he had to have the corner of quantum entanglement redone courtesy of a driver.
Oh.
Yeah. But it looks great, and it was a pretty straightforward repair.
Yeah.
The other thing is, people will say, "Oh, I see oil drip running on it. I don't want it." Well, I'm sorry. Particularly the straight sixes mark their spot. That's just a given. A rear main seal is not a reason to not buy a Jeep. If you
might go knock some money off the price.
you might be able to. I like to grab the front and then rear bumper and try and push and kind of shake the Jeep sideways from side to side and see if it's loose, if it clunks, if it, so literally if you're standing at the Jeep front bumper, holding onto the front bumper facing the side of the Jeep and pushing and pulling so that you're trying to shake it sideways on the sidewalls of the tires, you can see if you've got loose linkages that are moving. And if you drive it and it shimmies and shakes, again, those are things that are of concern that will need repair immediately, or replacement preferably, but may or may not be something that will stop you from buying it.
Right.
You may turn around being new to it and say, I don't want to start out with a Jeep with problems. And that's a very fair thought process. But the neat thing about Jeeps, the really, really cool thing is you can buy just about every single part to that Jeep from somebody.
Yeah.
I was posting online, somebody was upset. They had a TJ, the doors had never been off of. I didn't know that was legal. Anyway, and they were just, and I'm taking the doors off for the first time, and the nut twisted the threaded end of the door pin off. And they're like, oh my God, what can I do? And everybody's like, we never put the nuts back on.
Yeah.
But the thing is that, everybody's telling him this, but you could tell that the individual was a little bit, but it's broken. And I get that. I get that
absolutely.
You don't want broken parts. Yeah. And I said, calm down. I don't put the nuts back on my door hinges either. However, if you just simply have to have them, Dorman makes replacement door hinge pins. They're $7.95 a pair with new nuts. And all you do is take a little drift punch and a hammer, tap one out, and if you leave the door closed, do this with the door closed, tap the pin out, tap the new pins in from the top, put your nut on, and you're fixed. Oh gee, the nut's not painted, so get a little touch-up paint, a little duplicolor, and paint the top of the hinge pin to match your door. But that's the point is, the Jeep, when people say, well, what would make you not buy a Jeep? And it's, well, if it costs more than I'm willing to repair.
Yeah.
Because short of one that's, well, heck, I've seen guys even do rolling rust buckets and bring them back to life.
Yeah.
So, you have to ask yourself, what am I comfortable working with? Because now, if you're buying it and paying someone to fix it, don't buy something, because Jeep repairs can get expensive.
If you absolutely love that color, you can have a Jeep repainted.
Yeah, you can. There's not a lot of masking on the Jeep. Most things unbolt.
Exactly.
But I'm sitting here trying to think of something that would stop me, because the glass is replaced very easily. side marker lights, lenses, fender flares. The fender flares can be missing, can be ripped, can be grayed. You can buy a set of them for $200.
Yeah. Or cheaper if you find some online.
Yeah, and the only thing is you learn how to use a pair of pliers and twist around with your hand above your nose, behind your ear, to grab the back of those little plastic clips that the screws lock into.
Good point.
But again, somebody else in the Jeep Club's probably done it and could show you how.
Yeah. Food is a good motivator to have friends come over and help you work on your Jeep.
But don't bring the beer out till after they're done.
You know what I'm saying? That's why I said food. Food is a good motivator.
So, I realize that's not a definitive answer, but here's the point is, again, it's really kind of...
It goes back to our tagline.
Well, and it also goes back to our original argument that started off one of our first shows.
Mm-hmm.
Build or buy? Stock or Rubicon? And it depends on what you're going to do. If you like it ready to go out of the box...
Well, it's simple. You buy a built stock Rubicon, or you buy a built Rubicon for a stock price.
Said the man who hunted and actually did find the Jeep Unicorn.
For a sport price.
Yeah, he bought a Rubicon LJ 6-speed air conditioning.
Well, no, the air conditioning didn't work. That's
no, but
it was cheaper.
But we fixed it.
Yeah.
And so there's kind of the answer there is, what are you comfortable with?
Well, perfect example. You just said it right there. I wanted that Jeep.
Yeah.
Okay, the guy didn't pass up a cigarette or a vape store he couldn't live without.
Yeah, we did have to rip the entire airbox out and we replaced it.
We replaced it, yeah. The air conditioning didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
There were a lot of issues with that Jeep. Small ones though. But to me, the sum of its parts is great. I'm going to say this wrong. How do you say it, Kevin? Because you're smart.
The Jeep is greater than the sum of its parts.
Thank you. That's what I was looking for. There's a little nagging.
Yeah, the hood still looks like there was some sort of international clogging festival held on the hood.
No, that's the hood that Grace Jones used to dance to the Watusi on in 6-inch heels.
Same thing. Same thing.
For those guys in Patreon, they go, he really does roll this off on top of his mouth, and he does not have a piece of paper in front of him.
No, he doesn't. I don't know where it's stored in the back of that little brain there. That's where the instructions get thrown away.
Well, one of our listeners talked about how he totally gets the Toon Ted in our head reference, Well, now I've actually changed it now. It's the Benny Hill theme. Anytime I do something, when I was trying to do my spark plugs the other day, the Benny Hill theme just kept yakety sax. Just kept going in my head. I'm like, if
but we don't have the scantily clad, busty ladies running around in high heels.
With the right editing skills, moving on. Hey, speaking of scantily clad ladies in high heels, you want to take a brief... do you have anything else to add, or do you want to go ahead and hit the door in the garage?
That's fine. You can do your midpoint, whatever you call it.
Well, now that I derailed the show, Kevin needs to take 5 for a bio and to get his train back on track, because I think I just broke it.
Nothing new there, folks.
There you go. Well, you're right back after this quick message. Hey guys, don't forget to check out the 4x4 Radio Network and all of its fun stuff. And again, the Sinister Podcast and everyone over there, great shows to be had. Also, too, we are kind of doing a lot more behind-the-scenes footage on our Patreon page. And we are really close to coming up with the first, I guess it was the give-backs here hopefully soon to our current Patreons. So, look at the Patreon page. You'll check out some really cool stuff. If you want to join, it's as little as $1.
Mm-hmm.
That's the lowest you can do. Kevin and I kind of think it's the love-o-meter. How much love do you want to show us? You want to show us $5 a month? We'll take it.
Don't over-sappy it, but yeah.
You want to show us $1 a month? We'll take it. It keeps the show listener supported, so we're not beholden to anybody.
Right, and that's the key focus here, is that I don't want to have any of my, technical reviews
under scrutiny,
tainted by somebody saying, well, you paid, you didn't pay for that. That was a gimme.
You mentioned Dorman hinges in that last segment.
Well, Dorman hasn't paid me anything, but they are a maker of multiple replacement parts for a Jeep.
Yeah.
And, I've always said I'll talk about what worked for me.
Yeah.
and I've used a few of their parts.
My YG was 40% Dorman parts and 60% AutoZone. Moving on. So on that note, but again, just check us out. And, if you want to tell somebody, that's free.
Mm-hmm.
Share the word. Because Kevin and I are on the cusp of a huge podcast milestone.
Yep.
And we really are actually, and I kind of just blindsided Kevin with this, maybe by the end of July, we'll basically, I'm going to mouth this to Kevin real quickly. Downloads. So a lot of downloads, and that is a lot of listeners listening. So with that, I know you guys want me to shut up. We're going to get over to the garage segment, and you guys can learn something, right?
Sure.
Okay, here we go.
Hey, Patreons, one of these days we'll actually do the garage segment in the garage. There is a real garage.
Yes.
It just takes us more time to take all this down and take it over to the garage.
Yes, but we'll get there, I promise. And the door is up, and here we are with Kevin to learn us something, and the infatuation and knowledge and the power that is one that watches Kevin do his...
Can somebody get the floor cleaner out here? Yeah, clean that up first. No, okay.
Well, this was a family show.
Hey, it just picked it up with a broom and a dustpan.
It's getting deep in here. Hi, guys.
That's the problem.
And Kevin, you now have the floor. Literally.
I thought it was mine to start with. I'm not going to let him go, folks. I've got him like a fish on a hook line right now.
He does, man.
Hey, folks. Anyway, back to the subject that we were discussing earlier today.
Mr. Patrick and Bunt Stops.
Yes, and stopping the bump, or bumping the stop.
I think I just said Bunt Stops. A bunt kick in the mind?
I think you've been taking too many pain meds for your shoulder.
What have we got from that?
So, anywho, bump stops. That is one of those little mystery spots. And I hear everything from, oh yeah, I've got these 9-inch extended polyurethane monsters, to other guys go, no, I took them off and I don't even have the cups. I unbolted them and threw them away. And I'm going, okay, you know, they have a purpose. And they're like, I don't need them. And then you're following on the trail and you hear this wonderful...
Uh-oh. Foley work. The slapping noise of metal on metal.
Yeah, it's a sheet metal being distorted, a rubber being sliced wide open. That lovely sound that you've ever heard. And this one's, actually, I've suffered this myself. The sound of tires, the treads on the plastic flares, you know, as you're making a turn. Pretty much, you know, or the, would you put oil on these things?
Yes, it is.
Oh, you stinker. I was trying to make it creak, folks. Sorry about that. But anyhow, the secret is bump stops. And the reason I say that is most people use their shock absorbers as their bump stop, as a limiter on both downstroke and upstroke. Nowadays, most shocks are designed to be your lower bump stop. In other words, they control the maximum droop of your axle, or one side of your axle if you're flexing. But they're not really designed to limit your upward travel. Not without a special polyurethane bump stop that slides on the shaft before you even install them. And I wouldn't recommend using that. It's used in a lot of European automobiles. But it's not really great on a Jeep because the upper shock mount isn't really designed to take that force. Instead, you'll see that we have these little tubular steel pieces that come down inside our coil springs in most models. Now, even on the leaf spring models, they have rubber blocks above the spring axle combination, and they are there to limit up travel of the axle. And a lot of people either, like I said, leave them alone, stock, or they take them off entirely. I don't need them because they think their springs are too stiff. And where the failure is there is almost everybody I've talked to has thought about their bump stops with the axle moving up and down uniformly.
Right.
Not twisted. We really, all of us want our axles to be able to twist a lot. We've talked a lot about articulation on a lot of shows.
And before someone starts to tune out about how you guys covered bump stops so much, well, to be honest with you,
we haven't talked about this at all.
Well, the tuning of the bump stops, but a lot of people had questions.
Yeah.
And when people have questions, we're going to take time to answer them.
I'm going to take time to answer it.
Yeah.
What happens is you kind of forget that the bump stop is set inboard a little bit from the end of your axle and your wheel.
Right. Because that's the curve of the arc you said, right?
Well, as you arc up, okay, now you put a larger diameter wheel and change nothing else. Let's just say let's take your JKU, and the bump stop from the factory was set for 33s.
Right.
And you put 35s. Now I know you can put a 35 on, and that they've already calibrated the bump stop for that. But the thing is, you're still 1.5 inches taller tire radius wise, which means that now when the tire is up tight to the bump stop, you have another 1.5 inches of tire higher than it was before, maybe interfering with your fender sheet metal. Now, if you rack the axle so that, let's say it's the driver's side that's punched up tight, but you drop the passenger side in a hole, you've just twisted that axle, which, because of the fact that the bump stop is mounted inboard about 1 foot from the wheel can rise even higher.
Well, it's funny you just mentioned the exact scenario, because in my young Jeeping career with the JK, we put a 2-inch budget lift, a Rubicon Express, and I said, nah, you know what? I don't need to put those bump stops on. And my friend, who at the time worked for a certain manufacturer, said, you need to put the bump stops in. You're going to 35s. I'm like, no, I just want more. Trust me, put the bump stops in. And I did. Exactly what you said happened. I had it disconnected. I articulated all the way down, and it came up really close, but did not eat my fender. The Jeep behind me, who had pocket flares, 2-inch lift, 35s,
Pulled the flares off.
pulled his flare out and actually caused body damage.
Yeah, and that will happen, folks. It will rip and tear. Or sometimes the large diameter tires are so big that they swing up in that arc. If you're looking at it from the front of the Jeep, the upper tire swings in kind of like you're lifting a hammer.
Yeah.
And the top of the tire is like the claws of the hammer. And if the inner fender is now where those claws reach, guess what? You just ripped up your inner fender.
Yeah.
Or you, maybe if the inner fender is strong enough, you do nothing more than wear the tire, or if there's sharp steel there, you may cut the corner off of those $200,
At least.
mud lugs. And how you do this is really not hard, but people forget in the excitement of doing a lift. You go and you buy your lift kit. I don't care whether it's a rough country, I don't care if it's a metal cloak, if it's anybody's. It's so exciting. You want to put it together. You want to bolt it up. You want to do all this, and you look at the instructions. And even if you follow the instructions, it'll tell you, well, we give you these bump stop adjusters, these extenders, these different stops, all these things. And they'll give you a starting point, and then they say, you have to adjust it from there. And that's about all they tell you. Because everything's a little different in different models of Jeeps, different years of Jeeps, and with different kits. And they also don't know what other mods you've done. And I'm no different. I started off with a metal cloak lift with factory stock upper bump stops, the actual rubber ones that come with the Jeep. They look like the little emoji of, the brown three little lumps on top of each other.
Gunner piles.
Yeah, and I proceeded to, much to Scott's dismay, who was in the back seat at the time, split them in half and have steel on steel, going up a pipe mountain.
Nothing like getting your spine compressed.
Exactly. But, and it took me a while to stop and say, wait a minute, there's got to be a way to adjust it. People say, oh, well, you put one tire on a lift and you lift it, or you use a forklift to lift one side, or you do this to do that.
Oh yeah, I have my forklift in that side.
And that's the kind of thing I am too. And the answer turned out to be relatively simple had I done it when I was putting the lift in. Now, it was a little bit of a challenge doing it afterwards because I had to do a little disassembly. But fixing the bump stops made me disassemble it anyway. And that was I needed to remove the springs. And I simply put the jack on the same floor, 4 jack stands, tall enough. I actually used 2x4 blocking and built extensions underneath, like stacked Lincoln logs, to create the height to where I could put my axle on with my lift kit, with my shocks, without the coil springs.
Okay.
And now they would dangle all the way down and hang on the down stop, which is the shock. Right?
Right.
Then I could just simply put a floor jack under one side and start jacking up the other side. And it lifted and lifted and lifted and lifted and lifted with a tire on till it hit the bump stop. And then I could take my hand and spin the wheel. And my first thought was, hey, I got it right the first time. And then I turned the wheel while it was wedged, and it went.
You had yourself a little bit of fender buster.
Yes, I had to straighten. If any of you have a TJ, you know how there's a little turn down on the metal where the plastic mounts.
Yeah.
Mine was turned up. Fortunately, it's behind the plastic, and
I
so
think I remember that.
Yeah.
The little wheel wave. I'm like, did I shut up? Okay.
yeah,
Was that supposed to shut up? Okay.
So hey, I'm sure you what didn't work, and that was
True friendship.
So anyway, I ended up adjusting and adding a bump stop
Right.
material. I added an extra inch of padding in the lower bump stop to increase that offset, so that when I had the axle twisted all the way up tight, the one side was drooped to the shock fully extended, and the other one was pushed up tight to the bump stop. I could spin the wheel and I could turn it from lock to lock, and it didn't touch.
Okay.
It got real close,
Right.
but it didn't touch. I only run 33s.
Right. And that's kind of similar to now when we talked about Patrick's email. Is
Mhm.
that similar to the stuff he was talking about?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. That's the kind of thing that you have to do. Now the rear is a little easier because you don't have any steering on the rear, but you still have to pull the springs out and then let the axle dangle. Now obviously, if you have access to a 4-post lift or a 2-post lift, this would be much easier because you can
And
just
do
lift
it safely.
Yeah, do it safely. Actually, they make a safety hook that you can actually hook the frame to the lift, so that as you're kind of twisting the axles around, you don't risk tipping your Jeep off.
Good point.
But the key here is to articulate your axle to its maximum extremes with one side fully extended down against the shock, or if you're using a stop strap, and the other side is all the way up against what you think is the correct bump stop with the tires on. Then turn the tires manually, because you're not going to shred the tires or bend the body.
Right.
You're going to go, it doesn't turn freely. Got it. So those will get you close. Now I'm going to recommend that, okay, if it's less than a half an inch of clearance, if you can't get your fingers all the way around the tire, make it more, because there is give and take in a bump stop. Right now you're doing it completely unloaded.
Right.
If you punch that tire up in there with the full load of the Jeep on a big old rock, it's going to squish the rubber bump a little bit.
Right, and there's
And it's
also
gonna get
new tools
and
fuel,
everything. Exactly.
water.
So give yourself a little bit of room.
Yeah.
And I was very surprised, and I mentioned it a couple of shows ago, that I'm running a hybrid system. I'm running my metal cloak spacers on the axle, and I'm running the Curry bump stop system on my uppers, which is an aluminum with a urethane ball bushing that's very angle tolerant. Because you may find, as we did in the back of Slightly Altered,
It wants to spit out
the angle was so steep with the extreme articulation on some of these kits that you're pushing sideways and only on half of the bump stop. And in my case, I was literally overloading and splitting the bump stops and then spitting the remnants out, and which then the tire came up and ground into the fender well. So you can do this at home. It's easy if you've already jacked up the Jeep, have it on jack stands to put in your lift kit.
Mhm.
Okay, you're already high enough because you've got to be able to get your axle underneath, get it in and out, and spring. Just go ahead, put the arms on like you're doing it, follow the kit's instructions. You can put your steering linkage on, for the most part, like in the instructions. You don't have to hook up the drive shaft. You have to put the shocks on. And at that point, you pause and go ahead and do your bump stop sets. Then you can come back once you've got them in the ballpark and remove your shocks. Just don't have to take them completely out. Just take the 2 bottom bolts out, swing the axle down far enough, put your springs in, jack it up, put your bolts in, move on.
You're ready to go. And that's one of the things we talked about on the first show,
Mhm.
is that traction, because I fell into the trap. Why would that up travel? That's a really cool picture where that wheel just stuffed up into that fender. That does nothing for traction.
It does nothing.
Traction comes from the contact of the tire. So you want droop.
Yep.
If anything, you want droop. So if you can get that axle to droop down far enough, like using disconnects,
Mhm.
you can still keep the forward momentum in traction. So don't think of a bump stop as a limiting factor. Think of it as a way to, and anticipate's a wrong choice of words I'm using, but you get the idea. It's a way for function and make this thing work as a whole.
Right. It protects the whole thing about suspension articulation is to get the Jeep moving forward safely.
Well, because
And the bump stop is what protects the Jeep from itself.
and it can protect the steering, as our one listener had.
Yeah.
So
Contacting other body parts. And so that's just my little short one. This isn't going to be a long garage segment, but I just thought I'd throw that out there, folks, that you can set your own bump stops. It's actually, once you start doing it, it's actually kind of fun because you're seeing your Jeep from an angle and the actions that you're going to be using it on the trail. And this is what your Jeep does on the trail. I know I've got some great pictures. They're actually taken by Dory of my Jeep on a pretty twisted piece of a trench up in Florida. And you really only see the front of the Jeep with the axle stuffed up on the passenger side and the driver's side all the way down at full extension. And if you look really close, you can see the rear axle's twisted equally the other way. And the Jeep's basically level. And it's an awesome shot. And that's when you know you've got things set up correctly. And I guess the last thing, I did make a comment, but I'll leave it as a parting shot on bump stops, is don't be afraid that you may have to change out the upper bump stop itself, the actual rubber type. The factory bump stop is a little pile of rubber balls stacked on each other. They're molded as one piece, but they kind of remind me of an ice cream cone, you know, an old classic dipped ice cream cone, the big lump in the bottom, middle one, and the small one. And they are very linear. They expect the axle to come up and meet them straight. And with the stock suspension, it does that pretty much. It meets it dead center at the center of the spring perch. If you're working with a lift kit, particularly a high articulation lift kit, it's not going to meet straight. It's going to meet off center. It's going to meet at a weird angle. It's going to push sideways. We made that video of Scott's
Yeah.
LJ's rear bump stops crumbling in pieces because they were getting beat to smithereens.
My marshmallow collection.
Yes, your marshmallow collection. So just keep that in mind. You may have to search for a different upper bump stop system. And there are quite a few manufacturers out there. Like I said, I have had personal success with the Curry system. It's not an inexpensive system though, folks, but it uses a spherical bump stop that is heavily supported in an aluminum cup, and it doesn't care if the strike from the axle is coming straight up from the side as you would be flexing, or backwards or forwards under, you know, climbing a rock or something like that. And for me, that solved my problem. The only catch I had was they were a skosh bit shorter than the factory, and so I had to go down to the lower pad and extend that up by another 1-inch insert to get it the pads up so that they would meet and I wouldn't damage any sheet metal.
Gotcha. Well, and again, sometimes I know the technical stuff can make your head spin, but again, that's what the back 30 seconds button is for.
It is, and if you take your time and think about it, folks, like I said, the key is just leave the springs out when you're doing your lift, rig everything else up, and then get a floor jack out there and lift the tire up till it stops. And if it hits something, you need more bump stop.
And we talk about the one person like Patrick with his email, because he again,
Patrick
same thing.
asks questions, and I thank you,
we love
Patrick,
that.
more than you know. And the rest of you out there, you got to have questions too, you know.
Well, let me go hit the garage door for a second. All right, while the garage door is coming down, I did want to take a few minutes because we were talking about Patrick. He's actually got a page called Wheel Northeast, Facebook page. Yeah, he's the one that asked a lot of questions and had all that information, Team LJ. But he also talked about, like, you know, safely and tread lightly. So give his Facebook page, if it let me, I'll go ahead and throw a link on there in the show notes. But again, it just, that listener feedback we strive on.
Yeah,
you know,
because that helps us. I don't have to think of a subject to talk about if you guys send me a question.
Well, and again, it's like the Patreons, you know, we're trying to find ways to make our show better. And to do that, we need feedback from you guys, you know. And
What did you like? What did you didn't like?
And we had the one gentleman talk about how, you know, where we might come off one side on a certain subject with the wolves.
Yeah.
We take any kind of criticism, you know. But like we talked about in the show, this is a callback for you fellow radio people out there. Just like when you have an issue with a supplier or parts, you know, don't be afraid to approach and say, hey, I didn't like that, here's what I think.
Or I disagree.
Or you disagree. Bring it. You know, how we learn is having different opinions. You know what I mean? And that's how we all grow.
Yeah, and just understand though that if you come back to me with something that I think is dangerous for your life or other Jeepers, I'm going to let you know back.
Yeah.
So in all fairness, you know, I come from a very strong safety culture. And I know there's a lot of guys in the Jeep world that throw caution to the wind when it comes to safety, and I'm not one of them.
Yeah.
I like to come home every night after wheeling.
Yeah,
So
and I make
I'm
jokes,
weird that way.
Well, and I make all the jokes about zip ties, but when it comes to it, Kevin will not let me leave with something sketchily zip tied
No,
together.
I would take the zip tie and zip tie his fuel line closed.
No, he'll zip tie my hands shut and call Dorian and say, "You need to pick him up. He's doing it again."
So anyhow, anything else on your end?
No, that's pretty much it. Again, I really appreciate everyone's feedback.
Yep.
But on that note, though, again, we hope you all had a safe and
And happy 4th of July.
4th of July. And, again, this year's speeding by.
It is. But and don't forget, folks, in future shows, we'll throw a few more teasers out there about what's coming up in November. And, feel free to pop a note on the Facebook page or send us an email if you've got a guess.
Yeah, and speaking of which, that email address is onthetrailpodcast@gmail.com. I keep forgetting to say that. People go, "What's the email address, Scott?" And we've gotten Facebook messages saying, "You keep forgetting it, so I'm just going here."
How many segues do I have to give you to get you to say it? 'Cause
Exactly.
I don't remember it. I have to go read it.
And instead of the applause sign in the background for our Patreons, which we're hiding Easter eggs now, too, in the background. Hopefully you can see them. So, but again, that's one thing we wanted. And again, we really appreciate every one of you guys. So, as far as that goes, I think we've run out of time.
Yeah, I do believe so. And so, as we always say, enough time for talking. Let's lock ups, put the Jeep in 4-low, and hit the trail.
And thanks for spending time with us. And as always, wheel legal.
Tread lightly.
And take nothing but pictures, memories, and your trash when you leave the trail.
And be sure to check in on our next podcast of On the Trail with Kevin and Scott.
Hopefully we hit that mystical milestone.
And hopefully Scott can learn to speak English.
Guys, it's 10 o'clock. My mind just went. Have a wonderful night.
You too. Bye now.
Bye. Bye, Patreon. Have a great night.